My satin wedding dress shimmered under the warm Aspen resort lights, and my husband whispered a joke that made me laugh. Then my phone buzzed. A text from my dad read, "What the hell did you do?" 3 seconds later, another arrived. "The police are here." Chloe is screaming, "Answer now." I sipped my champagne, smiling a distinctly cold smile. Their financial ruin was no accident. It was a perfectly calculated equation returning exactly what they gave me. Hello, everyone. Before today's story begins, we'd like to share a quick message. YouTube recently removed our monetization, cutting off our income. If you enjoy this story, we humbly ask for just $1 to help pay our staff so they can make a living and keep creating for you. Thank you for saving us. Now let's begin the story. My name is Mila Reyes. The air inside the Aspen Lodge was heavy with the scent of pine and roasted cedar. Outside, soft snow fell over the Colorado mountains, blanketing the world in pure white. Inside was a sanctuary of warmth. A string quartet played a gentle melody in the corner. Crystal flutes clinked, laughter echoed against the wooden beams, and the soft glow of amber fairy lights danced across the faces of my closest friends. Liam, my husband, leaned close. His hand, warm and steady, rested on the small of my back. Everything was flawless, a perfect, intimate haven. Then the harsh vibration of my phone shattered the delicate peace. Sitting on the edge of our sweetheart table, it suddenly felt like a ticking explosive. It buzzed once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. I did not flinch. I just looked down at the illuminated screen. Arthur, the man who was supposed to proudly walk me down the aisle today, was rapidly filling my notifications with desperate messages. "Mila, answer the phone right this second. The catering manager is locking the grand hall doors. They are cutting off the food. Every single credit card is declining. Chloe is having a panic attack in the bridal suite. She cannot breathe. The police are walking into the lobby with clipboards right now. Call the bank. Fix this immediately." They were hundreds of miles away in the bustling city of Denver, drowning in a tidal wave of public humiliation at a grand estate. I could almost hear the chaotic symphony of shouting voices, the clinking of expensive silverware being forcefully packed away by angry staff, and my sister Chloe's dramatic sobs echoing through the marble hallways. Yet sitting here in my elegant satin dress, sipping vintage champagne, I felt nothing but an eerie crystalline silence within my soul. There was no racing heartbeat. There was no familiar urge to rush to their rescue and fix their catastrophic mistakes. That naive version of me was completely dead. Liam noticed the glowing screen. He glanced down at the frantic messages scrolling rapidly across the glass, then looked up to study my face. He did not ask what was happening. He did not urge me to call my father back. He simply smiled. A knowing, quiet smile reached over the table and laced his fingers firmly through mine. His grip was a grounding anchor, a silent affirmation of the destructive storm we had knowingly unleashed together. I picked up the device. My thumbs moved over the smooth screen with deliberate precision. I typed one single final response to the man who shared my last name. "Bask in the spotlight, just like you all always wanted." I hit send without an ounce of hesitation. Then I held down the power button and turned the phone completely off. The sudden black screen reflected the twinkling fairy lights of my wedding reception. I set the phone face down on the wooden table. The glaring absence of my parents and my sister today was not some unfortunate twist of fate. It was not an unavoidable scheduling conflict or a tragic stroke of bad luck. It was a deliberate, deeply selfish, and highly calculated choice on their part. They eagerly chose the sparkling, hollow illusion of Chloe's extravagant engagement party over my quiet, meaningful wedding. They chose the superficial glare of high society approval over their own loyal daughter. And today, as the clock struck 8 in the evening, they were finally paying the ultimate devastating price for that arrogant choice. The massive financial sinkhole currently swallowing their aristocratic facade whole was not a random glitch in the banking system. It was a flawless, catastrophic demolition, orchestrated down to the very last line of code by the invisible daughter they thought they could simply discard. Growing up in our Denver home, the roles were assigned early and permanently. My younger sister Chloe was the sun. She was radiant, demanding, and inherently designed to be the center of the universe. She styled herself as a freelance artist and a lifestyle influencer, though her primary medium was using a bright, dazzling smile to melt away any consequence of her reckless actions. If she crashed a car, she charmed the mechanic. If she missed a deadline, she cried until someone else finished the project. People naturally gravitated toward her blinding warmth. I, on the other hand, was gravity. Gravity is not beautiful. It is not celebrated or photographed. It is invisible, heavy, and relentlessly practical. Its only purpose is to keep things from flying apart and crashing into the void. My professional life perfectly mirrored this cosmic arrangement. I work as a lead systems architect at Aegis Cloud Dynamics. My days are spent building digital fortresses, managing server loads, and ensuring that chaotic streams of information flow in orderly, predictable patterns. My brain is wired for logic, risk assessment, and cold data. My position commands a very high salary, yet my lifestyle remains entirely utilitarian. I live in a quiet apartment, wear unbranded clothing, and drive a reliable 5-year-old sedan. My father Arthur viewed money differently. He operated a portfolio of boutique hotels and premium vacation rentals across the city. To his country club friends, he was a visionary entrepreneur, a titan of local hospitality who wore tailored suits and drank expensive scotch. To his bank accounts, he was a slow-motion disaster. Numbers do not possess the capacity to lie, and Arthur's ledgers were a gruesome sight. But the illusion of success had to be maintained at all costs. Over the course of 5 years, I became his invisible safety net. I quietly authorized the transfer of $350,000 of my personal savings into his corporate accounts. I did not do it out of overwhelming affection. I did it because it was the most efficient way to stop his incessant panic attacks and maintain the delicate equilibrium of our family. I was the silent guarantor on his loans. I was the ghost in the machine keeping his empire afloat. The financial bleeding did not stop with him. I routinely logged into banking portals to quietly wipe out staggering credit card balances belonging to Chloe. These debts were always accrued during her spontaneous trips to tropical islands or European capitals. Journeys she claimed were absolutely necessary to discover her artistic muse. While she posted filtered photos of ocean sunsets to thousands of strangers, I worked overtime to pay for the flights, the resorts, and the expensive cocktails she held in those pictures. I accepted this parasitic dynamic as a fundamental law of nature. Until I met Liam. Liam was a senior cybersecurity analyst brought in as a contractor at Aegis. He was quiet, incredibly observant, and possessed a mind that could dismantle complex security encryptions as easily as breathing. We started sharing lunch in the break room, discussing firewall configurations and network vulnerabilities. One evening, after I had spent 3 hours secretly untangling another one of Arthur's impending tax liens, Liam found me sitting alone in my office. The blue light of the monitors reflected off my tired eyes. He did not ask me to review his code. He did not bring me a problem to solve. He simply placed a warm cup of tea on my desk, pulled up a chair, and looked at me. "Are you tired today?" he asked softly. I stared at him, genuinely confused. No one in my entire existence had ever asked me that question. My family only ever asked, "Can you fix this?" or "How fast can you transfer the funds?" Liam saw the exhaustion I kept carefully hidden behind spreadsheets and firewalls. He saw the human being beneath the utility. In that single quiet moment, the heavy armor I had worn my entire life began to crack. Loving Liam was the easiest system I ever integrated into my life. He proposed on a rainy Tuesday evening in our kitchen without an audience, without a photographer hiding in the bushes, and without a single ounce of pretense. It was perfect. We immediately began planning an intimate, elegant wedding for a crisp weekend in November. We wanted 30 of our closest friends, excellent food, and the quiet majesty of the mountains. When I presented the plan to my family during a rare dinner together, the silence at the table was deafening. There were no cheers. There were no tears of joy. Chloe swirled her wine glass, her lips pressed into a tight, unimpressed line. "Just 30 people," she asked, her tone dripping with subtle condescension. "No live band, no press release. It sounds a bit tedious, honestly. You know, a bit too quiet." Arthur agreed, cutting into his steak without looking up at me. "It is your money, I suppose, but it hardly sounds like a celebration. Do not expect us to jump through hoops for a tiny mountain retreat." They found my happiness small and uninteresting because it did not serve their grand narrative. It offered no networking opportunities, no glamorous photo backdrops, and no spotlight for them to steal. I nodded quietly, packed up my wedding binder, and went home to the man who actually loved me. I thought their indifference was the worst pain they could inflict. I had no idea they were just getting started. The illusion of our peaceful coexistence shattered precisely 3 months before I was supposed to walk down the aisle. The catalyst arrived in the form of a man named Julian. Chloe brought him to our routine Sunday family dinner, like a victorious hunter displaying a prized trophy. He was a walking, breathing stereotype of a venture capital tech bro. He wore an aggressively tailored navy suit that screamed new money, a bulky gold watch that he made sure to check every 5 minutes, and shoes that probably cost more than my first car. Julian did not converse with people. He pitched to them. Throughout the appetizers, he aggressively name-dropped cryptocurrency startups, decentralized finance platforms, and exclusive seed funding rounds. He used words like disrupt, scale, and leverage until the syllables lost all actual meaning. As someone who literally built the structural architecture for enterprise data systems, I recognized his species instantly. He was a vaporware salesman. He had absolutely zero technical knowledge, possessing only a polished slide deck full of empty promises. But Arthur and Chloe hung onto his every single word as if he were a prophet delivering financial salvation. When the main courses arrived, Chloe stood up. She tapped a silver fork against her crystal wine glass, commanding the attention of the entire room. She was practically vibrating with excitement, waving her left hand around to make sure the blinding light of the restaurant chandelier caught the massive, suspiciously flawless diamond ring on her finger. "Julian and I are getting married," she announced, her voice echoing off the mahogany walls. My parents erupted into cheers. My mother actually wept into her napkin. I offered a polite, measured congratulations, genuinely hoping this meant Chloe would finally settle down. But Chloe was not finished. "We are not just having a wedding," she continued, her eyes gleaming with a manic, hungry ambition. "We are hosting an engagement gala, the absolute social event of the century. We have secured the grand atrium at the Wellington Estate right here in Denver. There will be a premium open bar, imported ice sculptures, a live string orchestra, and a guest list packed with Julian's high net worth investors. It is going to be incredibly exclusive." Arthur beamed with pride, already calculating how he could leverage the wealthy guest list for his own failing hotel business. "That is magnificent, sweetheart. When is the big night?" Chloe paused for dramatic effect. Her eyes flicked toward me for a fraction of a second, carrying a glint of predatory triumph. "The second Saturday of November." The air in the room went entirely still. The ambient noise of the restaurant seemed to fade away. Liam, sitting right beside me, went rigid. His hand squeezed my knee under the table. "Chloe," I said, my voice dangerously calm and perfectly level, "that is the exact day of my wedding." She let out a theatrical sigh, dropping her shoulders as if I were a petulant child ruining her magical moment. "I know, Mila. But Julian's primary lead investors from Dubai and Silicon Valley are only flying in for that one specific weekend. We simply cannot change it. The estate venue is already locked in with a massive deposit. It absolutely has to be that day." I turned my gaze to my parents, waiting for the inevitable correction. I waited for the moment my father would step in, act like a parent, and tell his youngest daughter that she could not intentionally hijack her sister's wedding day. My mother shrank back into her upholstered chair, suddenly finding her roasted vegetables incredibly interesting. She remained completely cowardly silent, refusing to make eye contact with me. Arthur cleared his throat. He did not look apologetic in the slightest. He looked deeply inconvenienced by my existence. He placed his linen napkin on the table and folded his hands together. "Now, Mila, let us be reasonable here," Arthur began, utilizing the exact patronizing tone he used when negotiating a bad vendor contract. "Your wedding is just going to be a small handful of people shivering in a wooden cabin up in the cold mountains. You have not even hired a band. You can easily push your little ceremony back to the spring. Chloe and Julian are building a diplomatic future. They are laying the groundwork for massive financial networking. This is a critical business opportunity for the entire family. You need to stop being selfish and look at the bigger picture." He was asking me to cancel the most important day of my life, so his favorite daughter could throw a networking mixer for a man who smelled of cheap cologne and expensive lies. In the weeks that followed that dinner, the true depth of the betrayal unfolded. The guest list for my wedding began to rapidly disintegrate. Aunts, uncles, cousins, and friends we had known since childhood began calling me with thinly veiled excuses. They were incredibly sorry, they claimed, but Chloe's gala was simply a once-in-a-lifetime event. It was completely free, it was drenched in luxury, and it was being heavily marketed on social media as the most exclusive VIP party of the year. Given the choice between celebrating my quiet, genuine love or consuming free top-shelf liquor at a historic mansion, my extended family eagerly chose the latter. My side of the aisle was going to be completely, utterly empty. I remember sitting at the dining table later that same week, watching them interact. Julian was loudly bragging about a phantom tech merger, waving his hands in the air. Arthur was nodding enthusiastically, completely intoxicated by the illusion of immense wealth. Chloe was busy taking selfies, pouting her lips at the camera lens to show off her ring. I did not cry. There was no lump in my throat, no stinging in my eyes. I felt an absolute profound emptiness. In that precise fraction of a second, every lingering drop of familial love, duty, and obligation inside of my chest flatlined. It was a clean, clinical death. I realized with absolute clarity that they did not view me as a daughter or a sister. They viewed me as an automated teller machine, an obstacle, a placeholder. I stood up from the table. The conversation abruptly stopped, and they all looked at me, bracing for an argument or an emotional tantrum. I offered them nothing but a serene, hollow smile. "Just do whatever you all want," I said, my voice as light as a feather. I watched a wave of relief wash over their faces. They grinned, assuming I had surrendered, assuming gravity had once again bent to accommodate the sun. They immediately went back to discussing champagne tiers and valet parking, completely erasing my existence from the room. They had absolutely no idea that my simple sentence was not a white flag of defeat. It was the ceiling of their absolute destruction. My family mistook my silence for submission. For my entire life, my quiet acceptance had been their green light to proceed with their selfish desires. They assumed my sudden compliance was simply gravity naturally giving way to the sun. They went back to their chaotic, glittering lives, completely unaware that I had stopped being their safety net and had quietly transformed into their executioner. In the world of systems architecture, when a network becomes irreparably corrupted by a malicious virus, you do not try to negotiate with the malware. You isolate the infected nodes, you sever the connection, and you initiate a hard system wipe. My family was the virus, and I was writing the protocol for the purge. I began my work the very next morning. As a lead data architect, information is my native language. People like Julian leave massive glowing digital footprints. He had spent dinner bragging about his decentralized finance platforms and exclusive seed rounds, tossing around buzzwords to impress my technologically illiterate father. It took me less than 2 hours to completely dismantle his billionaire facade. I accessed open-source intelligence databases, ran deep background checks on his registered shell companies, and traced the public ledgers of his supposedly massive cryptocurrency wallets. The results were pathetic. Julian was not a venture capitalist. He was a highly leveraged con artist drowning in a sea of toxic liabilities. His accounts were thoroughly empty. He had 2 pending lawsuits for wire fraud in 2 different states, and his heavily financed luxury car was 3 days away from being repossessed. He was marrying Chloe because he thought Arthur was a wealthy hotel tycoon. Arthur was funding Chloe's wedding because he thought Julian was a billionaire investor. They were 2 leeches aggressively trying to suck blood from a stone, completely unaware that the other was completely dry. But the puzzle was missing one crucial piece. If Julian was broke, and Arthur's boutique hotels were constantly hemorrhaging cash, how exactly had they secured the grand atrium at the Wellington estate? That specific venue required an astronomical upfront deposit. I logged into my father's corporate banking portal, a system I had managed for him for half a decade. I navigated to the pending transaction logs. There it was. A verified cleared transaction for $100,000 paid directly to the estate's event management group. My blood turned to absolute ice. Arthur had not used his own depleted checking accounts. He had pulled the funds directly from the company's emergency commercial credit line. That specific credit line existed for one reason only: I was the primary financial guarantor. I had placed my own immaculate credit score and personal assets on the line to ensure his employees got paid during the slow winter seasons. My father had actively leveraged my personal financial security to fund an extravagant party that was explicitly designed to overshadow my own wedding. The sheer audacity of his theft eradicated any lingering microscopic trace of guilt I might have harbored. It was time to build the trap. 3 years ago, when I originally signed the guarantor paperwork to save his sinking business, my lawyer had insisted on embedding a standard severability clause. It was a tiny buried legal mechanism that allowed me to formally withdraw my financial backing without his consent, provided I submitted the proper digital authorization to the bank's automated risk management portal. I had never intended to use it. Now it was my weapon of choice. I did not just want to step away. I wanted them to collide with each other. I accessed the Wellington Estate's vendor payment gateway using the credentials my father had carelessly auto-saved on his browser. The estate required a secondary billing method to be kept on file for the remaining balance of the gala. I swiftly deleted my father's corporate cards from the fallback position. In their place, I inputted the routing and account numbers belonging to Julian. I had intercepted these numbers from a fake proof of funds document he had emailed to Arthur. Now, when the venue inevitably came looking for the final massive payment, the automated system would bypass my father and aggressively charge Julian's spectacularly empty accounts. The final piece of the architecture was the execution method. I could not simply pull the plug now. If I did, they would have 3 months to scramble play the victims and find another host to parasite off of. The destruction needed to happen when they were at the absolute peak of their arrogance, surrounded by the high society they worshipped. It needed to happen when there was absolutely no way out. I opened my terminal and began to write a cron job. A cron job is a simple invisible time-based utility in software environments that automatically executes a specific command at a highly specific date and time. I sat in the dark of my home office, the glow of the monitor reflecting in my eyes, typing line after line of flawless execution code. Liam walked into the room, placed a fresh cup of coffee quietly on my desk, kissed the top of my head, and left without interrupting my focus. He knew exactly what I was building. I configured the digital script to interface directly with the bank's secure application programming interface. The command was programmed to instantly submit my digital severability authorization permanently, removing my name as the guarantor on Arthur's corporate accounts. Without my flawless credit backing it, the bank's automated risk algorithms would immediately flag the hotel's debt-to-income ratio. Standard banking protocol would dictate an instantaneous complete freeze of every single credit card and credit line associated with his business until a full audit could be conducted. I checked the parameters one last time. The logic was unbreakable. The legal standing was airtight. The financial routing was perfectly lethal. I moved my cursor to the scheduling input. I set the execution trigger for the second Saturday of November. I set the exact time for 8 o'clock in the evening, precisely the moment my husband and I would be cutting our wedding cake in the mountains, and precisely the moment the Wellington Estates event managers would attempt to authorize the final payment for Chloe's lavish open bar. I pressed the enter key. The terminal flashed green. The script was locked into the server, silently counting down the seconds in the dark. The trap was set completely invisible, entirely legal, and absolutely devastating. I closed my laptop, drank my coffee, and finally went to sleep, resting more peacefully than I had in my entire life. The second Saturday of November arrived with a crisp, biting chill, and skies of bruised sapphire over the Rocky Mountains. Standing at the altar in my satin gown, the air was remarkably pure. There was no empty chair left for my mother. There was no reserved spot for my father. There was no space for my sister. Their absence was not a gaping wound. It was a cleanly cauterized scar. I looked out at the intimate gathering of true friends and my new husband's incredibly warm, welcoming relatives. Liam's mother wept openly as we exchanged our vows, holding on to my hand with a fierce maternal love I had never once experienced in my own childhood home. The heavy wooden beams of the lodge wrapped around us like a protective fortress. When Liam finally kissed me, I felt an overwhelming wave of absolute healing. The heavy invisible gravity I had carried for 3 decades evaporated into the mountain air. 200 miles away, the grand atrium at the Wellington Estate was drowning in a suffocating wave of extreme vanity. According to the furious accounts that would later be screamed at me, Chloe's engagement gala was a towering monument to superficiality. Hundreds of Denver's elite milled about the towering marble columns. Waiters in crisp uniforms carried silver trays loaded with beluga caviar and perfectly stacked pyramids of imported vintage champagne. Chloe was holding court beneath a massive glittering crystal chandelier, wearing a custom designer gown that cost more than a standard mortgage. She laughed loudly, posing endlessly as hired photographers captured her every carefully practiced angle. Arthur was deep in his element, aggressively swirling a glass of expensive scotch while pitching his failing boutique hotels to men in dark tailored suits. Julian stood right beside him, loudly projecting false confidence, promising massive guaranteed returns on phantom cryptocurrency investments to anyone who would listen. They were swimming in a glorious golden sea of fraudulent wealth, utterly convinced of their own untouchable invincibility. The sky outside darkened and the celebrations progressed. In Aspen, the string quartet shifted into a lively, joyous rhythm. Liam and I stepped onto the small wooden dance floor, surrounded by the genuine laughter of people who actually loved us. In Denver, the catering staff began rolling out the extravagant dessert presentation, a cascading waterfall of spun sugar and edible gold leaf. The music swelled, and the alcohol flowed like water. As we swayed under the warm, amber fairy lights in the mountains, the clock in the corner of the lodge steadily ticked forward. 58 minutes past 7 in the evening. 59 minutes past 7 in the evening. 8 o'clock. Deep within the secure, heavily encrypted servers of a major national bank, a tiny invisible string of code awoke from its long slumber. The automated command executed precisely on schedule. With zero human hesitation, it submitted my legally binding digital severability authorization. Instantly, my immaculate credit profile was violently severed from Arthur's corporate accounts. The bank's automated risk management algorithm immediately detected a catastrophic drop in the hotel company's financial stability. Without my personal assets acting as a shield, the corporate debt-to-income ratio spiked directly into the red zone. The automated response was instantaneous and totally merciless. Every single credit account, corporate card, and revolving credit line registered to my father was locked, frozen, and flagged for critical default. At that exact second at the Wellington Estate, the head event manager was standing in the back office running the final authorization for the remaining balance of the evening. It was a standard protocol before releasing the final wave of top-shelf liquor to the guests. He swiped the primary corporate card my father had left on file. The portable terminal beeped loudly. A bright red error message flashed across the digital screen. Transaction declined. Account completely frozen. The manager frowned, attempting the authorization a second time. Declined. He tried the backup business card Arthur had provided. Declined. The screen displayed a harsh warning advising the merchant to contact the issuing bank immediately. Sensing a massive financial liability unfolding in real time, the manager quickly walked out onto the bustling gala floor. He navigated through the sea of wealthy guests, tapping my father politely on the shoulder. Arthur, visibly annoyed by the sudden interruption during his crucial networking, followed the manager to a quiet side hallway. When informed of the card failures, my father scoffed arrogantly. He pulled out his sleek black personal credit card, entirely confident it was a simple, easily corrected banking error. The manager ran it through the portable terminal. Declined. Arthur's face dropped. The color completely drained from his cheeks as he desperately logged into his mobile banking application. Where he expected to see his available credit margins, he saw only bright red zeros and locked account notifications. The financial safety net he had ruthlessly exploited for 5 solid years was entirely gone. "There must be a mistake," Arthur stammered, cold sweat rapidly beading on his forehead. "Run the secondary billing profile. Run my future son-in-law's accounts. He has millions." The manager pulled up the fallback routing numbers I had so graciously updated in the system weeks prior. He marched directly toward Julian, who was currently in the middle of loudly boasting about a 7-figure seed round to a group of very real, very wealthy investors. The manager, losing his professional patience and speaking loud enough for the immediate circle to hear, requested that Julian authorize the final balance for the venue. Julian puffed out his chest, produced a flashy platinum card, and handed it over with a smug, condescending grin. The manager swiped it. Declined. The terminal did not just reject the charge, it triggered a hard-coded alert. Because I had routed Julian's horrific delinquent debt profile directly into the primary payment gateway, the system identified his card as a high-risk collection asset. The machine loudly beeped a shrill fraud warning. Julian's smug expression instantly shattered. "Try it again," he hissed, his voice cracking with sudden panic. "The machine is obviously broken." The manager swiped it again. The rejection was loud, final, and absolute. The commotion caught the attention of the surrounding guests. The live music slowly died down as musicians noticed the rising tension. Hundreds of eyes turned toward the dispute. The wealthy investors Julian had been trying to con suddenly stepped back, exchanging bewildered looks, realizing the supposed billionaire prodigy could not even clear a basic catering tab. "Sir," the manager said, his voice carrying sharply across the suddenly quiet marble hall, "every single payment method provided by you and your father-in-law has completely failed. You are currently in possession of tens of thousands of dollars in stolen premium services and uncompensated venue space. If you cannot provide a functional wire transfer in the next 5 minutes, I am locking the grand doors and calling the police for felony theft of services." Chloe let out a piercing theatrical shriek, dropping her crystal champagne flute. It shattered against the marble floor, the sharp sound echoing through the dead silence of the room. The grand illusion violently collapsed. In front of the entire Denver high society, Julian was brutally exposed as a penniless fraud, and Arthur was revealed as a completely bankrupt failure. Back in Aspen, I was sitting perfectly still at the sweetheart table, completely oblivious to the deafening explosion I had just successfully orchestrated. Liam leaned over and whispered a gentle joke, making me laugh out loud. The champagne on my tongue tasted like absolute, undeniable victory. Then the phone resting on the wooden table began to violently vibrate. I picked up the device. The screen showed 15 missed calls from Arthur. I swiped the green button and brought the speaker to my ear. "What did you do?" my father screamed, his voice completely stripped of its usual arrogant polish. He sounded like a cornered animal. "The bank locked everything. The venue manager is threatening to arrest us. Fix the system right now. Mila, fix it." I took a slow, deliberate sip of my champagne. I did not do anything, Arthur, I replied, my voice steady and cold. I simply stopped paying for our family's delusions. I removed my name as the guarantor for your failing business. You are on your own. The silence on the other end was heavy, suffocating. I could practically hear the gears turning in his head as the devastating reality crashed down upon him. For 5 solid years, his entire identity as a successful tycoon was built entirely on the blood money of the daughter he had so casually discarded from her own wedding. He had sacrificed my financial security to fund a fraudulent lifestyle, and now the foundation was permanently gone. But Julian, Arthur stammered, grasping at thin air. Julian has the money. I let out a soft, humorless laugh. Julian is a highly leveraged con artist with 0 assets and multiple pending fraud charges. He does not have a single dime to his name. Oh, and those real investors he has been desperately avoiding for months. I anonymously emailed them his actual bankruptcy filings early this morning. According to the tracking data I set up, they should be walking through the front doors of your little gala right about now, and they brought the police with them. A chaotic symphony erupted through the phone's speaker. I heard the heavy thud of large wooden doors swinging open. I heard deep, unfamiliar voices shouting Julian's name. Then I heard the undeniable, frantic sound of expensive dress shoes sprinting across the marble floor. Julian, the supposed billionaire visionary, had bolted for the emergency exit the second he saw the authorities, leaving his brand-new fiancée to face the colossal wreckage alone. Chloe's theatrical, agonizing wails pierced through the receiver. She was screaming hysterically as the elite members of high society pulled out their phones not to admire her, but to record her utter humiliation. She was left standing under a crystal chandelier, abandoned by her fake wealthy fiancé, staring down a catering bill for hundreds of thousands of dollars that her bankrupt father could absolutely not pay. Mila, please, Arthur begged, his voice breaking into a pathetic sob. You have to help us. Enjoy the party, I whispered. I ended the call. The fallout over the next few months was absolute. Without my credit line keeping the sinking ship afloat, the bank aggressively foreclosed on every single boutique hotel in Arthur's portfolio. His prestigious country club membership was revoked, and his wealthy friends vanished overnight. Chloe, stripped of her influencer fantasy and buried under heavy legal debts from the fraudulent venue contract, was forced to take a minimum-wage part-time retail job just to survive. They could not reach out to me to beg for another bailout. The morning after my wedding, I canceled my phone plan entirely. I changed my emergency contacts, wiped my digital presence from their view, and moved my assets into a heavily protected trust with Liam. The morning after the ceremony, the world felt entirely new. Liam and I sat on the wooden porch of our mountain cabin. The crisp winter air filled my lungs. I held a steaming mug of black coffee in my hands, watching the thick, quiet snow gently cover the pine trees. I reached into the pocket of my coat, pulled out my old subscriber identity module card, and tossed it straight into the garbage can beside the door. For the very first time in my entire life, I looked up at the sky and saw nothing but clear open space. The crushing gravity was finally gone. I was completely, beautifully free. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. We hope you enjoyed it. As an ad-free channel, your support is what keeps us alive. Please support Haley Revenge Stories with just $1 via the QR code on the screen, or click the link in the description box or pinned comment. Also, we'd love to connect with you. Please leave a comment telling us which city or state you're listening from. Thank you for standing with us, and see you in the next stories.